Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for coming to share, learn a little bit about my dad. And thank you to all of you who sent me notes and texts and emails and cards. I just feel the love of the community. I'm just so lucky. Thank you. And I just thank the cantor for holding up the fort and the staff for filling in and helping out. Gosh, I'm just so moved that you're all here. Thank you. And I too want to recognize and acknowledge Eileen. Jeff and I were sharing this week in very different ways, but she's been a presence for me too. Israel. In Hebrew, it's Yisrael. My father's Hebrew name was Yisrael. Yisrael ben Meir Lev Rachel. Israel is a name, but its origin is really as a blessing. In the Torah, the patriarch Jacob wrestled with an angel of God in the middle of the night. Tired and with a wrenched hip, Jacob refused to let the angel go until the angel blessed him. And so the angel blessed him by changing his name from Jacob, Yaakov, to Yisrael, which literally means one who wrestles with God. The past few days, I've been wondering if my dad was like that in his life. Was he the type to wrestle and not let go, to not give up until he received a blessing, the blessings of life, of hard work, of relationships? I then wonder if I'm like that, and if so, did I get it from him? Israel is also the name for the whole Jewish people, the people of Israel. And so I've also wondered if that's just what Jews are supposed to be like, wrestle and not let go until we get a blessing. And so I've been trying to remember what he was like before his decline in dementia. And I realized, like each and every one of us, he had different aspects. There were different Irwins, if you will. And I'm sure each family member and friend experienced him a little differently, because each of us brought out, or perhaps allowed for, a different expression of his soul. Each of us, as Walt Whitman put it, contain multitudes. In Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism, there's two primary qualities or sides to the soul: the side of strength and justice, gevurah, and the side of love and compassion, chesed. It was pretty easy to see both of those sides in my dad. On the strength side, well, my dad was tough. He was, in fact, stubborn as heck. There were things he just wasn't going to change or bend to. A trivial example would be that the man only used like these old-timey razor blades to shave. You know, the kind with the interchangeable razor cartridges. In a world with electric razors galore, fancy lubricated safety razors, he just wasn't going to change. He had to use that scary razor no matter how many nicks he'd get on his neck. And I, going through puberty, had to learn how to shave on that thing. Lucky I didn't slit my throat. He did use aftershave, but for years refused to buy deodorant. Don't need it. Instead, he used rubbing alcohol because he thought it worked well enough as the active ingredient. And I honestly cannot remember him ever going shopping for clothes for himself. Pretty much every article of clothing he had predated 1977. If he did get new clothes or shoes or anything, it was either because someone gifted it to him or my mom badgered him long enough where he'd finally concede. I'm pretty stubborn, so I can credibly say that he was a stubborn guy. And he was tough. And if you know me well enough, you know that I don't shy away from a debate or argument, and neither did my dad, especially about politics and social issues. He would hoot and holler at you, or I should say at me, mostly me, when there was a disagreement. I know I drove him nuts. He'd get really mad at me. Of course, this became family entertainment at the dinner table during holidays, where my brother Rick or brother-in-law Mark would purposely try to get me to say something that would trigger my dad just to watch him go on a passionate tirade about the corruption of politicians or triple taxation or welfare or you name it. My dad was the type that once he made up his mind about something, that was it. But this is where the love and compassion side come in, because there was nothing that stood between my dad and me. Love and family were above all, and he and I had a special bond. We loved each other in the deepest and most fierce sense as a father and son could. He was my best friend whenever I needed one. He always had my back, even when I totally screwed up. And he was that way with everybody. He loved family, he loved people, and he was a hugger. Not everyone, especially men, are huggers. But when you came to our house as a guest, he hugged you. And it was a real hug. It wasn't a side hug. It was a pupik to pupik, belly to belly, heart to heart hug. And he was excited to see everyone, excited to meet new people. My mom loves to socialize and talk, but my dad was right there with her. He loved to listen. That was his superpower, listening. He'd take you in, be in the moment with you. He was interested in you, interested in people. He loved to learn about people and ask questions. Where are you from? Where have you traveled in your life? What do you do for work? And how does your role function exactly at work? What is your family story? He took people and relationships very seriously. He used to say to me, starting as a little kid, in his words, how do you size that person up? What do you think of that person? In other words, he was teaching me the importance of paying attention to people, that observing, understanding, and learning people was paramount. I remember when I was 19 or 20 and starting to question life and existence and God, and I was going off on some philosophical theory. And here you have to understand that my dad was smart, but he wasn't philosophical. He wasn't eloquent in his articulation. He wasn't a thinker like that. He was a hands-on person, a doer, a just get things done kind of guy. Of course, I, on the other hand, had already begun waxing rabbinic without even knowing it at this point. And I'm blathering on and on about life's meaning, and he's like straightening up in his bedroom, and he stopped, and I'll never forget it, and he asked, did you ever think that the whole point of life is relationships? Now, I know that my father never read Martin Buber's theological treatise, I and Thou. But in that question, he just summed up one of the world's greatest philosophers in a sentence. And I also know that that's what he believed, and that's what he embodied. And when he wasn't busting his tuchus to make a living for our family, that's what he prioritized in the world, the relationships that he had with other people. And however imperfect and tough and stubborn he was at times, despite all of his mistakes, he made people feel welcomed and cared for and embraced and loved. And there have been dozens of people in this world that called my dad, not for an orthopedic consult, but to be listened to and maybe to ask him for a little advice. Because they knew that at the end of the day, when they needed someone who would not shame them for what was happening, but would instead hold them, when they needed someone who would not blame them for their circumstance, but would instead encourage them, they turned to my dad. And maybe that's the deepest meaning of Yisrael, of holding on until you're blessed. We're supposed to hold on to people and to hold them, to love them and embrace them in the light, but also, and maybe most importantly, in the darkness of night, while they're wrestling with the angel of God, wrestling with life. Because that's when we're brought close to one another. That's when hearts are vulnerable and cracked open. That's when the deepest connections are forged to the one truth that there is, which is that we're all one family. We're a family of families, belonging of one heart. We should stick together and learn to live and be together no matter what the circumstances or disagreements. My dad didn't believe in familial divisions. He was a unifier, not a divider. He accepted everyone into his home. My dad would say all the time that the thing that he was most grateful for was just being together. No qualification to that. Doesn't matter in good times or bad times, but just being together. To be grateful for just being together, well, that's a true blessing. When my first daughter was born, my dad said to me, you only have one job as a parent, just one job, to make sure that your child never doubts that you love them. I have screwed up every which way one can in this life, and I still do every day. But I pray that despite all that in the end, I'll live up to the lesson of my father, that my children will never doubt that I love them, that my family and friends never doubt it, and that my community never doubts it. My father's example motivates me to be a better man, and I'm so lucky for it. I'm so lucky I got him as my dad. Thank you, God, for giving me my dad, and that I got him for all this time on earth. May I be worthy of it. I love you, Dad. Rest now. Rest with your parents. Rest with your brother and all our ancestors. Rest, and I know that sometime down the road, we'll get to just be together again.